The night my father looked me in the eyes and told me to stay in the kitchen, that my sister would handle the investors, was the night everything I had built, sacrificed, and bled for finally made sense. Not because it was fair, but because it showed me exactly who these people were and exactly what I needed to do. Let me take you back to where this really began. 3 years before that opening night, our family restaurant was nothing more than a failing lunch spot in a strip mall. My parents had run it for 11 years, and for 11 years it had barely kept the lights on. My father was a proud man, the kind of man who believed that effort alone deserved respect, even when the results told a different story. My mother kept the books, smiled at customers, and pretended everything was fine. My sister Camille, 2 years older than me, had always been the family's front-facing favorite. She was charming, well-dressed, and knew how to work a room. She had never once stepped inside a professional kitchen in her life. I, on the other hand, had spent every dollar of my savings, money I earned working doubles at a fine dining restaurant downtown, to attend culinary school. I graduated near the top of my class. Then I spent 2 years staging at restaurants in New York and one grueling season in Lyon, France, sleeping in a shared apartment with 4 other cooks just to learn from a chef who didn't even know my name for the first 3 months. I came back home not because I had to, but because my father called me and said the restaurant was going to close unless something changed. He said he needed me. He said the family needed me. So I came home, and I rebuilt everything from scratch. I redesigned the entire menu. I retrained the kitchen staff, 2 of whom had been there for years and had never once been taught proper technique. I negotiated directly with local farmers and suppliers to bring in ingredients that actually had flavor. I changed the plating, the timing, the atmosphere. Within 8 months, we had a wait list on weekends. A food critic from a regional magazine came in anonymously and left a review that called our tasting menu quietly extraordinary. That review caught the attention of a man named Gerald Foss, a hospitality investor who had backed 3 successful restaurant groups across the country and was looking for his next project. Gerald reached out through a mutual contact. He wanted to meet the chef. He wanted to discuss a potential investment of $5 million to expand the restaurant into a proper fine dining concept with a second location. $5 million. For a family that had spent over a decade scraping by, that number felt like something out of a dream. My father handled all the communications with Gerald's team. I didn't think much of it at the time. I was too busy running the kitchen to worry about the business side. I trusted my family. That was my first mistake. The opening night event was designed specifically to impress Gerald and his associates. It was meant to be a showcase, a chef's tasting menu, personally prepared, meant to demonstrate exactly what the new concept would look like. I had spent 2 weeks developing every single dish. I tested each course dozens of times. I sourced every ingredient personally. The night was mine, built on 3 years of work. And then, 90 minutes before service, my father walked into the kitchen, looked me in my chef's whites, and said it, calm, certain, like it was already decided. Stay in the kitchen. Your sister will handle the investors. I stood there holding a spooning of sauce I had been tasting for the last hour. I looked at him. I looked at Camille standing behind him in a cocktail dress, holding a glass of wine she had already started on. She didn't look sorry. She looked like she had been waiting for this moment. I set the spoon down on the pass. I untied my apron slowly, folded it once, and placed it on the counter. I walked out of the kitchen, through the back hallway, out the rear exit, and got in my car. I drove away, and I did not look back. I was 7 minutes down the road when my phone started ringing. It was my mother. I let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again, then Camille, then a number I didn't recognize. I turned my phone face down on the passenger seat and kept driving. My hands were steady. That surprised me. I had expected to be shaking, crying, pulled apart by guilt the way I always had been whenever I disappointed my family. But there was nothing like that. There was only a strange, clean quiet, the kind that comes when a decision has already made itself and your body simply followed through. I pulled into a parking lot near the river about 2 miles from the restaurant. I sat there with the engine running and the heat on low. Outside, the city moved like it always did, indifferent, continuous, unbothered by the fact that I had just walked away from 3 years of my life. I picked up my phone and texted Gerald Foss directly. I had his number because his team had sent it over during the early planning stages, and unlike my father, I had saved it. The message was simple. I told him I was the chef he had come to see tonight. I told him I had left the building. I told him that if he wanted to know why, I was available to speak whenever he was ready. I sent it and put the phone back down. What I did not know, what I only found out later, was what happened inside that dining room approximately 10 minutes after I walked out. According to one of the line cooks who texted me that same night, Gerald Foss had been seated at the chef's table near the kitchen pass. He had been watching the kitchen through the service window the way serious investors do, not just tasting the food, but reading the operation, observing how the team moved, how orders were called, how pressure was handled. And then the kitchen went quiet. Not the focused quiet of a team in the zone, but the confused, leaderless quiet of people who didn't know what was supposed to happen next. Camille had come out to the dining room in her cocktail dress and introduced herself to Gerald as the family's director of hospitality. Gerald had smiled politely. Then his phone buzzed. He looked down at it. He read my message. He looked back up at Camille, then toward the kitchen window, then back at his phone. He stood up from his chair, not urgently but deliberately, the way a man stands when he has already made a decision, and he spoke loudly enough for the entire dining room to hear. He said the Michelin-star chef he had come to fund had just texted him that she quit. The room went silent. My father, who had been standing near the host stand looking pleased with himself, reportedly went the color of old chalk. Camille stopped mid-sentence. Gerald reached into the inside pocket of his jacket, took out the check he had brought with him that evening, the $5 million check that my father had apparently already been told to expect, and he tore it in half, cleanly, without drama. He set the 2 pieces on the table, thanked everyone for the appetizers, and walked out. My phone rang 4 minutes later. It was Gerald. He was calm, direct, and completely unbothered by the chaos he had just left behind. He told me he had done his research before coming tonight, and that research was about me specifically, my training, my background, the reviews, the supplier relationships, the reservation numbers before and after I took over the kitchen. He said he invested in people, not buildings. He asked me where I was. I told him the parking lot by the river. He said he knew a coffee place 2 blocks from there that stayed open late and asked if I had 30 minutes. I did. That conversation lasted 2.5 hours. By the end of it, Gerald had proposed something entirely different from the original plan. Not an expansion of my family's restaurant, but a standalone concept built entirely around me, my name, my menu, my kitchen. A proper fine dining room with a private dining space and a tasting counter, seating 40 people maximum, in a location he already had in mind near the Arts District. He wanted to move fast. He said the kind of clarity I had shown that night, walking away from a sure thing rather than accepting disrespect, was exactly the kind of judgment he looked for in someone he was about to trust with a significant amount of money. 6 months later, Selene opened its doors. The first night of service, every seat was full. Gerald was at table 4 with 2 colleagues. The review that came out 3 weeks later used the word luminous. 8 months after opening, we received a Michelin bib gourmand. The following year, our first star. My family called several times in those early months. My father left a voicemail that began with an apology and ended with a suggestion that we discuss a partnership. I did not return that call. My mother sent a card. Camille texted once, a long message that I read and then sat down and never answered. I don't carry anger towards any of them. Anger is heavy, and kitchens require you to be light on your feet. But forgiveness does not mean returning to a place that showed you clearly it would always put you last. What I know now, at 26, running my own restaurant with my name above the door, is this. The moment my father told me to stay in the kitchen, he thought he was diminishing me. He didn't understand that the kitchen was never the insult. The kitchen was always the throne. He just never bothered to learn the difference. And if you are watching this right now and someone in your life, a parent, a partner, a colleague, has ever told you that your role is to stay invisible while someone less capable takes the credit for what you built, I want you to hear this clearly. Walk out. Not in anger, not in desperation.
Walk out with your apron folded and your spine straight, because the right people, the Gerald Fosses of the world, are already watching, and they will find you. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button right now, because every week we bring you real stories of people who were underestimated, overlooked, and counted out, and who came back stronger than anyone saw coming. You don't want to miss what's next.